Hello and welcome to Culture Reads Live. We are going to be, over the course of the next couple of months, having some conversations about an exciting opportunity that is currently unfolding here in Springfield. Typically, we have Culture Fest in September. Of course, this year our circumstances are different, but we have taken advantage of the opportunity to do something a little bit unique. We're going to talk about that today. But first, I want to introduce my guest. We have with us a very special guest. We have Susie Carey. Before we go much further, let me just pause and let Susie introduce herself. Hello, Susie.
Hi,
Feel free to
Jack.
introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Susie Carey, and I work for the Springfield Foundation. I'm the director of grants and scholarships there. And I've lived here in Springfield most of my life. I have a husband, Dan Carey, and three children. One who just graduated from college in May, and then I have two daughters at Miami University. One is a senior and one's a sophomore. And I have two mini golden doodles, Gemma and Obi. And so they've been really great helping me transition to being an empty nester now.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being with us. We're looking forward very much to hearing about what you have been doing in the Culture Reads initiative this year. Many of you may recall that in September we typically have a Culture Fest festival downtown. This year we have decided to do a reading group. So we have a variety of books. There was a selection committee that was chosen. We went through and we selected a variety of books on the topic of racism. The idea is we don't want to sit idly by and let this opportunity pass when we could be exploring some ideas to better ourselves and better our community. So there are a variety of books available. Some people are selecting them and then putting together some discussion groups so we can talk about the contents of the book. Susie, did you select a book to read?
I did. So I selected White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And it's by Robin DiAngelo. And, this kind of came about through a series of events. I saw the photo on social media of George Floyd, who was killed by a white police officer. And that image is kind of ingrained forever in my head. And I was really bothered by it. And, I talked to a lot of different people, my African American friends and colleagues, and just trying to make sense of the whole thing, what I could do, to try to make things better. And so that was the first thing. And then Nancy Flinchball from the city called me because the Springfield Foundation had given them grant money for Culture Fest. And so when that had to be canceled, she asked if some of the money could be used for alternative programming. So our board approved that. And I called Nancy back to let her know. And I said, I would love to see some sort of programming around racism and what's going on right now and, across the country. And so then when they decided to do Culture Read, I was like, oh, great. I'm going to participate. I want to be part of this conversation and, learn what I can do to try to make a difference. So that's kind of what got me involved with that. And then I picked this book basically because one of the people that I talked to was Mary Moore. And, I was just asking Mary, I don't understand this. I don't know how one person can do this to another human being. And she said, I've been telling all my white friends to read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And so she had made that suggestion to me early on. And so, that was kind of in the back of my head. And then when I, learned what the three books were, that the city was suggesting we read for Culture Read, I picked White Fragility, basically because that was what she suggested would be the best place to start.
Thank you for sharing. Sounds like you had some personal reasons for selecting the book, but also came about partially because of a recommendation. Is there something about this specific topic of this book that stood out to you? Something that spoke to you in terms of the three books? What is it about this one that drew your attention?
I think the thing is as white people, we never really talk about race that much. And you hear a lot about white fragility and white privilege and that sort of thing. So I think that was really kind of what drew me to it. Was just trying to learn and understand what all that meant.
Wonderful. So at the moment, you're in the midst of reading the book, and then are you also involved in any sort of a book group discussion? Is that also a part of this project?
Well, actually, my office is reading one of the other books as well. So I'm kind of, we'll be reading two books, but my boss has already read this. So we have kind of our one-on-one conversations, about what we read in the book, what it means to us. But the formal will be with one of the other books that he chose for us.
Marvelous. That's kind of one of the things I enjoy about this particular project is there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of room for people to both select a book that
Mhm.
appeals to them, but also just different ways for this conversation to manifest. It may be some employees at a place of work. It may be a group from a faith community or a church. It may be just some neighbors that get together and discuss this. So I appreciate you sharing your insight there. My executive producer, Nancy Flinchball, has written down a few comments and questions related to the specific book. So if it's okay with you, I would just like to explore the book a little
Sure.
bit. Could you share for us one more time the title and the author of the book? You might want to hold
Sure.
up your copy
So
there. This
the
is one of the
author
available books.
is Robin DiAngelo, and she's written White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I've got a note here. It says here that the first chapter of this particular book is entitled The Challenges of Talking to White People About Racism. And then I guess the idea there is that we begin with an introductory exploration of that topic. And so the question that's here is, what exactly is she talking about? Have there been any experiences that you found that have lined up with this notion? The idea that it might be difficult for those of us who run the majority culture, those of us who are white Americans, to discuss race. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So basically, what Robin DiAngelo explains to us as white fragility is that discomfort and defensiveness that we feel when people try to discuss race, and that we often are silent or we get defensive about it. Might get angry, or other kinds of pushback, that we might experience. So that's kind of what she's trying to convey to us in that first chapter. Um, and it really makes you start to examine yourself, and think about different things. She goes on to talk about that race is a social construct, that really there's no difference, and she talks about why it was constructed, put into place. And, it's really hard as white people for us to, one, talk about race because we don't really identify ourselves by our race. We are the majority. We control, all of the systems and policies and those types of things in our country. And we view ourselves as individuals, and so we see that, based on how hard we work, that anybody can be successful in our country. And we don't recognize that, there are barriers, because of these systems that are in place that prevent all people from having the same opportunities in life that we do. And, so, as you sit back and read these things, you start thinking about things that have happened, throughout your life and situations you've been in. So, you asked me about one of my experiences. So I remember it's probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I was at Lowe's with my daughter, and we're walking through Lowe's, and we passed two young ladies. They were African American, and they had these shirts on that said, "Black Girls Rock." And after we passed by, I felt kind of defensive about that, and I leaned over to my daughter and I said, you know, what would they think if we walked by and we had on White Girls Rock for our shirts? And boom, there's that white fragility that popped out, because why do they have to say, we're black when, in actuality, everything in the world is created around whiteness. In the United States, it's the symbol of beauty. You're judged on whether or not you can pass as white. You have all those opportunities because you're white. So why shouldn't they be able to be proud that they are young, black, African American girls? And so when I started thinking about that, at that time I didn't have, the knowledge or the words to know what that feeling was, but that's how it manifested. And, now I'm aware and now I know about these things. As we go through life, we're conditioned all throughout our life as to what these social constructs of race are. And so we don't really truly learn that it's different for different people who aren't like we are. And so this has been really, really eye opening for me, myself, because I don't want to be that person. Um, I know I'm part of a group that, is perceived that way. So I want to be one of those people that can be an ally for my black friends and colleagues and people of color. And I don't want to do those things or say those things, that are offensive or, you know, continue to hold people down.
Thank you for sharing both your insights from what you're getting from the book there, but also from your personal experience. I appreciate that. There were a lot of things in your answer there that I found very helpful. I've heard this term white fragility before. That's the title of the book. And I hear phrases like white privilege. And some of the people that I've talked with, sometimes they perceive that to mean that we must in some way be ashamed or guilty
Mhm.
about our position in the world or about our race. What's helpful about that answer you just gave is I heard a few key ideas there. One of them was this idea of defensiveness. It's not necessarily about being feeling guilty about who we are, but simply not being so defensive when we're interacting with the
Right.
topic, when we're putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes and thinking and listening with empathy. And so that's helpful to me. This idea that it's not so much about, from your description, it sounds like, not so much about placing blame on one particular people group. It's about being able to open our eyes and widen our
Mhm.
perspective and think about something from somebody else's viewpoint. So, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I've got another question here, and I'm going to read it directly from the page because
Okay.
I want to make sure I get the phrasing right here. There's apparently a second chapter in the book, and the title is Racism and White Supremacy. That is the name of the title. How does the author define white supremacy? Is there a how would you describe that concept for our
Sure.
listeners?
And so I'm going to also read because I wanted to make sure that I said the right things that she said. So Robin DiAngelo says that white supremacy is an all encompassing centrality and assumes superiority of people defined and perceived as white and the practices based on this assumption. So she's really what she's trying to tell us in this chapter is because we are part of this group of people who are afforded these opportunities and benefits and privileges of this group, that in actuality, because we control all of the um, basically social and institutional systems in the country, that we are all a part of this white supremacy, because that's how this country is being created. And so we often take offense to being labeled that because we think of white supremacists as those extreme and violent, often violent groups, and that's not what they mean here. They're not looking at people as individuals, but rather as a group, and how all of those institutions and systems are not um, set up to be fair to everyone.
Interesting. That's a helpful distinction to me because many of the people I talk with, they will say, "I'm not a racist." And so the idea is that we as individuals can often know that we may not have acted personally, individually, in a way that is racist. But what you're describing seems to be something that's larger than the individual. It's not
Right.
necessarily that the individual actions don't matter. It sounds like you're talking about systems and structures,
Yes.
and how they might be put together in such a way that are beneficial to those of us who are what we consider the majority culture, as
Hmm.
opposed to those who might be in a minority group.
Right.
That is a helpful distinction. for us to keep in mind. Thank you for sharing that. I don't want to put you on the spot with an unscripted
That's
question here,
okay.
but if you had one key takeaway, if there's something specific just from your reading so far, we've
Mhm.
only gone through the first 2 chapters here today. Is there something that stands out to you as a particular personal action step, something that maybe a change of perspective, something that came to mind for you so far that you have put into practice in your own life?
Sure. So, as I've been reading this, and, I really am starting to understand and see the complexity of what's going on, around these systems and institutions. And I think it's for myself, it's trying to be aware of how I walk through life as a white person, and how what I say, what I do, um, how I treat people has an impact on people. And so, one of the things that I have vowed to myself that I'm going to do is that if I'm in a group situation and something about race comes up, whether it's a joke or, a statement that somebody says, that I'm not going to sit back silently and not say anything, that I'm going to speak up and, tell them why either it's offensive, why I find it offensive, why other people might find it offensive, and not be afraid anymore. Because I've decided that, you know, I don't want to have relationships with people that are going to continue to try to keep other people down. And, if you lose friends in the process of it, then you lose friends. But, to me, that's something that I have to do to be an ally for people of color.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing
Sure.
your personal insight, and also just a way that you have in your life made a commitment to both to listen empathetically, but also, as you said, to stand up in those times when we feel like something might have been said that was said or done that was unhelpful. Thanks so much.
Mhm.
I would like to extend one more thank you to Susie Carey, our guest today, the grant coordinator from the Springfield Foundation. Thanks for being with us. I got
Sure.
tongue-tied when I was saying the name of your foundation, Springfield Foundation. Not only for being with us, but for the part you've played in helping to facilitate this project. I have good news if you're listening in. It is not too late to become involved in this project. We still have plenty of opportunity for you to get involved. There are some books that have been selected by our selection committee. There are 3 of them that are available. We'll talk about some more of those books in some upcoming episodes. What I'd like you to know is there is an opportunity for you to get involved. You could select one of the books from the selection committee. There's also some room there if you had a particular book in mind on the same topic that wasn't selected. You can make use of that too. The idea is you'd select a book, you would read it, you would get together with a group to discuss it in some ongoing basis. Of course, you can see today we are socially distanced and wearing our masks. You might choose to interact in a way that is safe, perhaps digitally, online, or in some sort of a safe setting in person. You can discuss the book. You can learn more about this in a few different ways. Some books have been made available by our generous partners who have helped us to put this project together. You can find them at the circulation desk of the library. I believe that's at the main branch. Is that right? At the main branch on the south side of downtown there. You can also learn more by going to springfieldohio.gov/culturefest. There you can read about the project. You can also, I believe, watch a few videos there about what it is that we have going on. And last but not least, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of Culture Read 2020. Of course, we look forward to the day when we can all be together in person again on City Hall Plaza celebrating Culture Fest. But in the meantime, we have an opportunity to broaden our perspectives. I would like to thank the Springfield Foundation, the First Energy Foundation, Southfield Village Apartments, Clark County Public Library, and of course, our fine city of Springfield. Thanks again, Susie, for being with us. I look forward to talking with you all some more with an additional guest, looking at our next book in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Wear your mask, stay safe. We'll see you next time.